this is the Harvard Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. As I do in the beginning of each episode of my podcast, I mention social media and audio platforms. And to add on, I'm on Substack. I write on Substack as a supplement to my podcast. And questions, comments, concerns, greatly appreciate it. I appreciate all the feedback and I appreciate the listeners. You can reach me through emails or social media. That will be provided in this episode. And let's go on to the audio platforms. I'm on Spotify for podcasters. I'm on Overcast, Pocket Cast, Pandora. I'm on iHeartRadio. And I'm looking to grow to wherever you enjoy your podcast, I'm on that. So this episode is about the history of the high heel. I'm going to give my thoughts and facts on it. So let's get into it. I think it's very interesting, the whole reason behind the high heel and back to the functionality and the reasons why and functionality. It's very interesting how things are thought of or invented out of something that's needed or out of what's already there to make it better or out of mistakes, and foods and for instance, the sandwich that came out of thinking about what to do, out of the process of what you already have, and improving on that, out of a whim, out of a thought, and I just it's very interesting, the innovative spirit and the innovative results that come from this. All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about the high heel. Leggy glamour and glittery fashion statements, of course, talking about the high heel. All that we now associate with the high heel give way to humble beginnings in wearing them. They actually serve a very practical purpose. High heels weren't originally intended for women at all. When it comes to heels, women were the late adapters. The real fashionistas in the history of high heels were men. Let's go to ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, about 3500 BC, the first heels were worn by butchers. Yes, that's right. By wearing elevated shoes, Egyptian butchers were able to walk over slaughtered animals and bloody floors without dirtying their feet. So depictions on ancient Egypt murals also illustrate figures wearing high heels for ceremonial purposes as well. So in Greece, in ancient Greece that is, high heel level pieces of footwear belonged to actors. They were flat shoes with wooden or cork bases up to 4-inch thick. The high heels were actually meant as a kind of shorthand about the social class of various characters in Greek drama and comedy. They were higher the heel, the more elevated. The higher the heel, that is, the more elevated the character. In Persia, one of the most convincing theories about high heels took over the world comes from the shoe expert and academic Elizabeth Semmelhack, I believe the pronunciation, a curator of the Bata Shoe Museum in Canada. So the thought is, Parisian riding shoes were the real source of the first trend. Parisian artists show that many noblemen of the medieval Parisian Empire wore heels as riding shoes. In the 10th century, Parisian male soldiers riding horseback used heels to secure their feet in the stirrups and to give them more leverage when fighting. Parisian nobles in the 1500s wore high heels, which were often in very decadent. They're very elaborate. That is, materials and bright colors. According to Samuel Hack, the European worlds really perked up and took notice when a Parisian monarch came to tour to the European courts in the 1500s, wearing colorful shoes with high heels. The diplomatic gesture turned into the fashionable one too. People saw the beautiful heeled shoes worn by these people, and the entourage, by this person in the entourage. I believe the pronunciation was Shai Abbas, I believe. Forgive me for pronunciation. And decided to make them their own. Those things were not only gorgeous, but made the wear appear taller and more formidable to wear. So in Venice during the 1400s, women were staggeringly high with their heels. Slightly tilted shoes with as many as 24 inches of narrow platform heel underneath. They were called chopins and were designed to keep the mud off more delicate real shoes of ladies walking the street. Their real shoes were often made of easily stained material like animal skin or satin. The chopin was eventually outlawed in France for various reasons. One was that they were most often than not worn by prostitutes who used them to get attention. All right, Japan. The utilitarian shoes are actually not just a European idea. The Japanese had them for centuries under different names, but for the same essential idea, keeping the expensive kimono from touching the dirty ground. Apprentice geisha, known as Amako, believe, would wear footwear called kobo, which were made of solid wooden blocks that towered above the ground. The concept of the elevated foot has been present in Japanese fashion for ages. The geta, a shoe made of plank of wood with two other underneath to hold the wear off the ground, can be up to 18 centimeters high. So, the Renaissance in Italy. The idea of the low shoe and high heel as an option for women in Italy seems to have made its debut on a fairly spectacular public occasion, a royal wedding, when Catherine de' Medici married the Duke of Orleans in 1533. The 14-year-old bride apparently wore towering heels to look slightly more like an adult. Her shoes made a stir, and the door opened to women wearing high heel shoes that were decorative rather than uniform or utilitarian. So, the Baroque period in France. The real fashion maven was Louis XIV of France. He loved all things ornate. He was the one who made the seriously decadent, decadent, uh, very elaborate palace of Versailles, his center of power. The high heel was just the thing he wanted to look. He wanted to look even more elaborate. Standing at just 5'4", he adopted it enthusiastically, often with up to 4 inches of heel on his court shoes. He even developed a trademark of red painted heels and ordered all male members of his court to dye their heels the same color. The high heel went through a series of fall and fortress after the French Revolution. People wanted nothing to do with looking like an aristocrat who became seriously unpopular. Massachusetts and the Puritans. The New World wasn't fond of the high heel either. Massachusetts Puritan banned high heels outright, hence there's no photo, thinking they were seductive and possible instruments of witchcraft, but the high heel would bounce back. In the Victorian era. The Victorians were actually the ones who rediscovered the heel. During the era, a few inches of heel was considered quite enough. The focus was rather on the instep. A curved instep was supposed to show a woman's femininity and refinement, and the tiny heeled feet were the height of sophistication, that is. It was the beginning of erotic photography too. And high heels played a strong role in the first years. Some of the first new photographs of women featured high heels. It was also a feature of most of the French postcards, as sexy photos of ladies were called at the time. The male hold on the heel was thoughtfully broken. Once they had been around for a while, high heels on women began to accumulate their own erotic feminine sophistication. Well, not sophistication, significance. Some French authors in the 18th century began to talk about the finely arched foot and delicate curved heel as sexual attributions, and made the heel a key part of desirable, notable woman's fashion. It was at this point that men stopped wearing a high heel and had become more of a woman's shoe associated with impracticality and irrationality. Now, the American cowboys. Heels on cowboy boots were used as they were on the Parisians' riding boots to secure the foot in the stirrups. Bootmakers like Hiker and Justin developed them specifically for American cowboys and Western-style saddles. Usually the heel was put on modified European riding boots or U.S. cavalry boots. There were several types of heels for cowboy boots. Low heels, usually around 1 1/2 inches high, and were ideal for ranch activities, walking and riding. Standard heels, usually 1 inch or lower with flat bottoms, are best for walking and ranch working. Spiked heels, usually 2 inches for higher with wide, flat bottoms, are ideal for riding. And to add on, the designer shoe for that is Christian Louboutin and Charles Jourdan, to be exact. All right. So on to the last segment, the 20th century to present. By the 20th century, narrow heels represented femininity. However, a thick heel, high heel, was sometimes socially acceptable for men until the 1950s. Shoe heels were typically made of wood. In more recent years, heels were made of a variety of materials, including leather, suede, and plastic. Now, the stiletto, the narrowest heel, was named after the slender Italian dagger of the Renaissance. The stiletto heel first appeared in the 1930s. The inventor of this long, often steel spike thin heel remains in dispute. But today, many attribute its rise to its fame to Roger Viviers' work for Christian Dior in the early 1950s. Italian shoe designer Salvatore Frigmargo, I believe, forgive me for the pronunciation of that, paved the way for stilettos by inventing the steel arc seen on Marilyn Monroe's high heel pump, possibly enhancing her famous walk. Some historians also credited him with the invention of the stiletto heel, while others credited French fashion designer Charles Jourdan, I believe, was the first designer shoe under their Pierre Cardin label, as well as Christian Dior. Whether you credit this discovery or not, they all have their place. As the passion for the highest in sophistication live on today in most fashion houses, whether it be the red bottom Christian LeBlancs, the Mono Blanc, or your favorite brand, high heel trends continue to be popular in creating $34 billion in business. Now this reaches the end of the Hovering Light. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. And also, questions, comments, concerns would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Take care.